Maureen asked me to give you guys a couple minutes of things that you should be aware of when you're doing circles. I thought I would have time towards the end of the day, but I wasn't ready, and I didn't have enough coffee to do it right first thing this morning. But as we were going through earlier doing the introductions, the inquisitive part, don't be afraid as you're going through your meeting. If you're hearing him or your core member answering questions, and it's happened to me a few times where 20 minutes later something clicks and I want the core member to, I didn't quite understand, or I don't think he was being clear, or more times than not, he wasn't being totally truthful. Not that he was lying, he just didn't tell us the whole truth. To go back and revisit something that you spoke about and ask it in a different way, or be more specific. Because sometimes they'll tell you things and they'll gloss over stuff and omit stuff, not because they don't want to lie, but they just don't want to tell you because it might be embarrassing or for whatever reason. So even if it's 20 minutes after your circle talked about a certain thing, if something doesn't sit right with you, go back and ask. And some of the things that you may want to do this with is the money situation with your core member. If they work, and the last 3 core members I had trades. So when they got out of prison, they had jobs that they could go to that would make them significant money. So they didn't have money problems per se. They had an abundance of money, which can cause its own problems. The ones that don't have a job that pays well, they have different types of problems. And sometimes they just sit at their halfway house or wherever, and that can cause different types of problems. So things about money. And if your core member says, I went out with friends, or I went out with a friend for dinner, sometimes you just take that face value. Always go back and clarify, was your friend male? Was it a co-worker? Was it female? Not all core members have restrictions that keep them from being with females. Sometimes it's just young children, so they can go out with a woman, but they have to, if they get into a romantic relationship, they have to tell her about their past. So a lot of core members say they're just friends and they're not in a relationship. But ask the core member if it's a female and get their name, because sometimes they say, I went out with a friend, and if you don't know who it is, then 4 months down the road, well, I told you about her before. Maybe not. If you have a name, then you have something to index back with and say, oh yeah, that's that girl that you went to that concert with, or this thing. So get them to be specific about who their friends are, male or female, and the exact extent of the relationship. If it's just friendship, or if they're looking to go further with it, just so that you're aware. And don't let it be generalized like friends or a co-worker, because friends and co-workers could be the opposite sex, which could be a red flag for them. So that's my advice.
Thanks, Walter. All right, I just showed the schedule for the day, so we know how it looks like. Sorry, just... Oops, sorry. Okay, there we go. All right, just so that you know how the day will look like, this is what we have. So we're done with Walter. The next one will be, the topic will be on ways to promote your CM's pro-social behavior. So Anita's going to be going through this. Then we'll have Emily up next to do another insight on her own experience and how to keep CMs on track. Then we're going to go for a bit of a break. Then we will have this next one, which is on engaging with difficult core members, which I'm sure some of you have experienced. After that, we'll have Richard to do a little bit of an insight as well on his 10 years with CoSA. Then we will have lunch. We'll call it lunch and learn, because we're going to work through lunch, right? Then Anita will talk about the principles of group support, including the use of affirming language and avoiding labels. Then after that, we will have a bit of a short brainstorm session on what we can do for CoSA in terms of funding or an action plan for, I guess, how we can make the circles work better. Then we will close with a reflection that will be read at the end. Okay, so this is what the day is going to look like. So with that, let me turn it over to Anita.
Perfect. So the object of today is to basically make you aware of pro-social behaviors that we should encourage in our circles, and how we can go about doing that. First of all, pro-social behavior is defined as behaviors that are intended to help others. These actions are characterized by a concern for the rights, the feelings, and the welfare of other people. Behaviors that can be described as pro-social, including feeling empathy and concern for others. Pro-social behavior includes a wide range of actions, such as helping, sharing, comforting, and cooperating. CoSA volunteers modeling of pro-social behaviors. The greatest strength of pro-social modeling is that the research evidence suggests that it works. It does seem to be related to better outcomes with individuals that have been convicted of criminal activity. Model and express the views which support the value of a law-abiding lifestyle. And that's a very important point to remember. Again, always promoting and support the value of law-abiding lifestyle. And we have to often correct the CM on that, because we think, oh, well, that's just the way he is and that's the way he talks. But we do have to challenge that aspect when he comes out with these statements that aren't really accurate and don't promote pro-social behavior. It provides a method for discouraging and challenging antisocial comments and behaviors within a positive framework. So we're not saying, if he said, well, police are always like this, and we go like, yeah, right, or you say, oh, well, it's just him, it's his experience. We have to challenge those comments still too, and frame it positively. It puts into practice the idea that people learn best by encouragement rather than discouragement, and that's always the aspect. We're not there to shame the CM more, we're there to support him and to encourage him to do the right thing, and to challenge some of these concepts that he or she has. Volunteer features that enhance the effectiveness of pro-social modeling. Empathetic, empathic, I guess, direct. You have to be flexible to adjust it to the situation. You have to be warm and inviting, not really strict at that point. You encourage participation. It's not like you're just telling them, you're saying, what do you think about this? And you go on with it. You have to be respectful. Always when you do anything, we're not their teachers, we're not their parents, nothing like this. We are there to encourage them, and we should be respectful with them. Rewarding. Basically, when they do something good, we make a point of pointing it out to them. We don't just assume they're going to do that. You encourage them, and you support them. Appropriate use of humor. And that's sometimes we think something's funny and it really isn't. And vice versa, sometimes when the situation is a little tense, a little humor can just lighten it up a little bit. So you have to use appropriate use of humor. Appropriate self-disclosing. Because we've got something to share, it doesn't mean we have to give all the details and then release that information. It can be done as in a third person. If it's something that you've experienced maybe with your family or a good friend or whatever else, and you don't need to say my daughter or whatever else. You'd say a friend I know did this or whatever else. So remember to phrase it properly. You have to be attentive, not looking out the window, not keeping your eyes closed, anything like that. It's very important. I know some people feel that they can reflect on it better if they got their eyes closed, but you can't. What does that say to your CM? That what you're saying is not important enough, and it gives the illusion, it's the perception. It may not be the case, but the point is that it's the perception on the point of the CM that thinks, he's falling asleep. while we're doing this. So, and it's very important. Ask open-ended questions, always, not answers that they can give you with yes and no. Open-ended so that you get more information, always. Be confident with what you're saying. Trustworthy, you have to be emotionally responsive. If they're dealing with something very difficult, you've got to show some emotion too. And you have to instill hope, and you always have to keep in mind the cultural and the spiritual mentorship still too. Remember that we're not all of the same culture background and the experiences, and we need to keep that in mind when we're talking and we're discussing things with our core members. And even the volunteers are not culturally all the same we're accepting. So we have to be sure to consider those things. CoSA volunteer features that inhibit effectiveness. If you got aggressive confrontation, you're saying, okay, listen, this is you're doing this again, you shouldn't be doing this, and it's not right. So we've got to be careful not to be aggressive. We don't want to reject their thoughts, because sometimes some of the things sound so ridiculous to us, but it isn't really ridiculous to them. So we can't appear to be rejecting them. Discomfort with silence, that's a biggie. We've always got to fill in the silence. Sometimes it's good just to not say a word and just let it rest, and they feel, if you've asked them a question and you don't go in to try to further clarify it or else, just leave the pressure that he's to respond. So keep that in mind, always. Unable to wait for answers, you're just feeding it right away. Like, again, it has to do with the quietness and the silence. Being sarcastic doesn't help, and that's, again, sometimes an inappropriate use of humor. Angry, and I can say I've also been triggered by a couple of core members that, just are confrontational and everything else like this. We've got to be able to control ourselves as volunteers. Boundary problems and use of inappropriate humor, again. So what you say and how you say it matters. I know you are doing well and complying with your conditions, but we need to continue seeing you every week anyway because you've still got problems. How effective is that?
Not good.
Not very good. So that's kind of punishing a pro-social action that doesn't make sense to do it. And as to rephrase it, could be, because you have attended all your meetings and have always been on time and you've complied with your conditions and you're managing your risk factors, as well as you have a good rapport with your PO, if you want, let's try meeting every 2 weeks. So we're saying the same thing, but we're saying it, we're framing it in a positive way. And that's very important to do. So rewarding of pro-social behavior. The police seem to be having a go at a lot of CMs lately. They never leave you alone, do they? Because if they feel that they're being persecuted and judged and being followed and intimidated by them, we don't feed into that. That's basically not supportive of a law-abiding perspective. And sometimes you can empathize with it. You can say, it must be frustrating. But again, always remember to take that law-abiding approach to things. Rather saying, it must be frustrating if you feel that the police are really out to get you. I think most police are really just doing their job. Is there some way that you can change what you are doing so that they are less interested in you? Peter in our group actually had a great example of that the other time still too, when he used it, where he was making a broad statement. He said, well, no, I think generally the police are trying to do a good idea. It's very important to always bring them back to that aspect, to be, again, that pro-social aspect. Response to the issue of police harassment with a more pro-social perspective. That's what we're doing when we do it. It is good that you went for the interview, but with the unemployment situation the way it is, you can't expect too much, can you? That's a very pessimistic view, and we have to take an encouraging aspect all the time with it. That is great that you went for the employment interview and that you've kept our circle meeting with us today. We can see that you're really making an effort. More optimistic and acknowledges the pro-social actions of the core member. Does anybody have any comments about those examples? You want to add anything?
Yeah.
Yes?
Yeah, concerning
police, they have a, I used to be with the RCMP, so, but they have, they get a file for each person on parole or whatnot. They have a file, and so they just have to do the checks just to meet the needs of the file. It's not a harassment ever, so you could actually tell them that. And when there is a sex offense in an area, they look at the registry, and they go and they check absolutely everybody that could fit that category, just to make sure that that guy has an alibi. So they're just really, like you said, doing their job. So those are things that perhaps might help you know that.
Thanks, Andy. That's a good perspective. It's something else that we can inform them of and let them know why. Tina or Marie, do you have any comments about anything? No? What were you going to say, Marie?
No, just thinking that throughout all of them, the whole thing that gets me is helping them to realize, you know what, we can't change anybody else. We can't change corrections. We can only change how we deal with that situation. So the circle should be saying that, what are other ways you could deal with that? This is tough, but how can we help you to find other ways to deal with that? Because even, making explanations doesn't help. It's like all of us, we have to learn to deal with the people in our lives. It could be our jobs. I mean, we don't all have choices, right? We have to get along with people who are ticking us off or making life difficult. So I think the circle really needs to help them and sometimes role play. This is when they say this or ask this, how could you answer better? Because usually they're not answering that nice, and that's not making the correctional officer or police or anybody happy with their attitude. So we need to help them with their
Accepting it. How can CoSA volunteers be effective if they have a pro-social orientation, but at the same time have little understanding or empathy of their CM's perspective? And that's tough for some of us. I mean, we don't have a criminal past. We don't have the kind of behavior that they may have come with. It involves being open about problems you, the volunteer, may have had, which are similar to the CM, i.e., I spent a period of time unemployed at one time, and I found it depressing. It also involves being optimistic about the rewards which can be obtained by living within the law. I think that's my fault. Apologies. It'll stop in a second. Okay, just thanks. And how do we do that? How do we do that in our circles? What's an example? Well, when do we do that?
Well, at the opening.
That's right, the check-in.
The check-in.
That's the purpose of the check-in. You have trials and tribulations and challenges, but we also have them. So that's why it's so important for the check-ins to be appropriate and responsive to the core members' attitude. It can't be, I got frustrated because I came in on the traffic, the traffic was terrible, well, they were driving, and stuff like this. You've got to make it relatable to them, and you've got to say, yeah, there's been struggles like this, or this is how I handled this difficult situation that came up this week. If you haven't had the challenges, you can also share a joy that you had, or some unexpected pleasure that you've had. I think the point is you have to show them, and if you can, at the end of your check-in, relate it to them. Is like, okay, well, there was a difficult time with a family member, and there's been some resistance there for a long time and some disagreements and stuff. But I just thought, life is too short. This is a Easter thing, and I thought it's time to get over this. I did, and I went and spoke to them and talked to them about it, and I feel so much better from it too. Just because it was like that in the past doesn't mean it has to continue like that. And then say that, it makes me think of what you said with the relationship with your sister, the way it is now. So relate it to them. It can't be just, okay, everybody seems to have such a difficult time doing the check-ins and always has a difficult time trying to figure out what it has to be said. Let's think about your CM, the challenges they're having, and how you can run a parallel to what you've done in your life. So that's the important part of check-ins. Does anybody have a question about check-ins and how that should be? Do you all know the purpose of it now? Yes, Richard?
Just to reiterate, how long should you talk about yourself in the check-in?
How long?
Yeah.
Oh, a minute at the most. Well, this is not, you know, if we remember that the meeting is about the core member, it's not about us. That's the key thing. It's just, this is for the core member only. And it should be focused, otherwise now you're changing the focus to you and what you've gone through. Doesn't make sense. So it has to be brief, it has to have a point, it has to be relatable to the core member. Do you notice on your online, your MAPS form, that there's a check-in that says, is it relatable to the core member? Be aware of that. You can even ask them, you know, is this relatable to you? Is it not on the new check-in? Yes, it is, yeah, on the form. And it says, you do it. You can ask the core member, did it serve any purpose? Our check-ins today, was that relevant to you? Yes, Claudia?
What you said about, you know, make it relatable, I always hesitated to make it relatable for them, like openly say, it made me think of you or the situation with your sister, but what you're saying now, like, tells me it's okay to do that, that to have to make the assumption or presumption of saying, I think it's similar to what you're going through, or that's going too far.
Yeah. Maureen or Tina, any comments on that? I find it's always very helpful that we relate, and actually we've got a core member now that gives us input every time. I've never had that in 9 years where they comment on our check-ins still too.
Oh, really?
Which is really interesting. Usually they say, yeah, you know, and that's it. But now they're really, you know, he's giving us the feedback, so.
Okay.
Okay.
And it's very important not to comment on anybody else
Yeah.
and the other volunteers, but it's great to encourage
That's
people
hard.
to mention.
That's why it's very important to encourage the core member, and we gotta remember why we're doing this. This is not just, oh, well, they asked me, I gotta do a check-in. No, there's a purpose, and this is the purpose, right here. Okay?
What would be a good time to do that, to ask the core member for feedback about a volunteer's check-in?
I think right after
Right
the
at the time?
volunteers, I think right at that point, when it says, how did you find the check-ins? Could you relate to them? I mean, they're usually so polite, they'll say, yeah, anyway, but you know, the point is that if you get, as you develop more and more, and you can see, you know, you can tell when a check-in is not good. They're looking out and they're on, okay, so this gives me 5 minutes to kind of zone out because they're gonna tell me about the traffic and, you know, what they've had and stuff like this, or, you know, they've taken the bus or whatever else, and you're going, you know, and it's been a beautiful day outside. What's that got to do with them? It's got to be relatable. It's got to be relatable.
You can actually, sorry.
Yeah.
You can actually see it in their, you know, in their
Yeah.
expression, and they're really looking intently at you when it really relates and it hits home. So I think the
Yeah.
check-in is very important in the sense that it really sets the tone. And, you know, it's not a piece of the CoSA meeting that is not essential. It is very essential.
It is, it is. And you know what, if you're giving your check-in and you're seeing, and like Tina said, you're seeing that they're not engaged, you'd say, you know, is there something that you're thinking about or something happening here that, you know, you want to? Bring them back in. If they're zoning out, bring them back in. Is this, you can't relate to this, or what is the problem, you know, with it? So you need to, don't say what is the problem, but, you know, the thing is find out why this is not meaningful for them. So the check-in is such an important part, and is so not done properly all the time by volunteers, okay? Because it really can be an excellent tool. Yes?
When we do these trainings, we should start with a check-in and then tell each other. Practice a check-in.
That's a great idea. That's a great
No,
idea.
seriously, because sometimes
Yeah.
I'm like, I wonder if this was a good check-in, but I mean,
Yeah.
learn from it, right? It could be a
Yeah.
situational, I don't know.
That's a good idea.
I find maybe 30% at most do proper check-ins. And it might start the first few meetings and then you can forget it. And it becomes more of a social rather than a tool. And at the start, I know for myself, when I'm there at the start, I always remind the volunteers, I don't comment on each other's, but we want to hear from you, the core member. what you feel. The other thing is, I think if we're really trying to grow as people, that we should be helping the other volunteers and in front of the core members. They know if we're not doing it well. And we should say, hey, you know what? We need to kind of work on our check-ins a little bit better. This was, no, we need to correct each other. We're trying to help them, we need to help each other. And that's part of really growing as a volunteer. And I know it's hard, but it's not just for them to grow, the core member, it's for us. So if I'm not doing it well and Emily says, you know what, Maureen, it was really interesting to hear about your drive here, but you know, maybe next week you can really think about something personal that you can help us, you know, that you can share.
I have a question or a comment. One of my CMs habitually zones out, totally just looks out the window, eyes glaze over during check-in time, and I can assure you that there are some excellent check-ins happening, you know, and so how do I respond to something like that? Do I challenge the core member at that moment right there and say, I'm sorry, you look like this is really not interesting? Like how do we respond to that?
I think that's important because that's part of the pro-social behavior.
Yeah.
Just to say, you know, I don't want to put you on the spot, but you don't look like you're really interested in what I'm saying. How do you find, you know, like, try to draw them out that way. Yeah, I think that's part of the pro-social, maybe not the first few meetings, but once you've built a relationship, I think we owe it to them to help them with that pro-social skill. And then to even say, you know, even if you find what I'm saying boring, we need to be looking. We need to be attentive because it hurts my feelings or I'm trying my best. How could I do better? You know, how do you think I could do a better job? Like put them on the, not with the slow. We have some who are developmentally very challenged. And I think it's beyond them. Yeah, they're gonna look out into space, but I'm not getting the sense that that's the type of core member you're talking about.
I think you know what I'm talking about, yeah.
Teresa? I'm sorry.
Okay.
Teresa?
Correct me if I'm wrong. I think I'm the 70% of those volunteers who are not really doing a good check-in.
Right.
Well, I have to take the perspective on that because we think that usually I would do more than a little bit more than 1 minute, maybe 2 minutes, like in between that. I have a concept that I'm trying to make the meeting, especially from the beginning of the meeting, to be a little bit more lively, more sociable, especially for our CM. We find that they are really very rigid or defensive to the meeting to be too tight, to a lot of restrictions, a lot of rules to follow, a lot of checking, a lot of testing on him. So usually I will try to do in the beginning to be a little bit more casual on my daily life. So how should I do it to be better, to meet the requirement of being related to the mission of the meeting?
Well, I think for one thing, you know, when the CM kind of comes in, and I'd like to have Tina or Maureen give some feedback, but I would say, you come in and you say, oh, hi, how are you doing? And what do you know, this, and oh, you look good, and you know, what's going on, and that's a new jacket, and you can make it social in that way. But the check-in is a part of the structure of the meeting and should be taken in that sense. It can be lighthearted, it can be thing, but it has to be constructive. That's the and it has to meet the objectives of it. So that, in that sense, is what has to be done. But it can be done. It doesn't mean it has to be strict and but it has to be that there's a purpose for it. It has to be a clear purpose for it. And we understand it's serving the pro-social behavior, modeling that, and doing that. Any other, yes, sorry. Go for it.
And I was just gonna say, I think it helps if, like after some time, you kind of know already where your core member is coming from, right? and what he struggles with or what he has difficulty with, then you look back at your own week and see what you can relate to. Like, for example, this core member that we have, he has a bit of a hard time, I guess, forgiving or being compassionate, or seeing the other person or people around him as some people trying to help him, because coming from the prison system, right, where he's been in for like 38 years, his defenses are always up, and he's built walls around himself, right? So I just look back at what I might be able to relate. That's sort of something he can pick out from, and that's what I do for the check-in, right? So look at your week, or it doesn't even have to be your week. You could look back at your life and see what you can pick up, and basically share with your core member that he can pick up on as well.
I have to be honest too. I've made up a few myself. You know, when I don't have anything good, like I'm going, this guy has a problem with anger. So let me give him an example of how I managed a situation. So I'm guilty of that. If I can't find something that relates to his risk factors and things that have to be kind of looked at. Just Maureen, were you going to say something else?
I was just going to ask the question, whose need is it to make the meeting light? Is that your need? Is that a need of the core members? Always looking at that. If the core member had been texting me during the week and saying, hey, I'm really down, I need something light, yeah, maybe I might share something personally that was a concern but ended up being light. But we always have to look at whose need is this, because this isn't like all our other relationships, right? We have one focus, and that's the core member. So any question is how we help them in the check-in. And I can hear what you're saying, because sometimes I think, oh my goodness, I'm tired of all this, down stuff. But if they need it, if that's where they are, we don't want to make it light. And I think that your particular core member tends to be down quite a bit, right? So I don't think it's our job to make it light. Maybe it's our job to say, how can we help you later in the meeting to feel lighter about the load you're carrying? But did you get what I mean, Teresa? I don't know. I mean, it's just a thought.
Yeah, and there's ways, even like, I know, like it was just past Easter, and you bring in goodies that we had, or Easter bunny in one case that we brought and stuff, and say, hey, we had a great Easter and stuff, and here's celebrating. So we continued, we had coffees and stuff, and that's how you can lighten things up and also make it, in that sense, more of a social aspect too. There's other ways to do it too than using the check-in as that.
That's a virtual though.
Well, that's a virtual. Oh, you're virtual.
So it can be a little harder.
Yeah, that can be harder. David, you're going to add something?
Yeah, I think the social atmosphere can be at the beginning, but once the check-in start, the meeting start. So there's another part of it, because from the check-in, the meeting starts. So it's not the social aspect of it. I find with the check-in, we all have life experience, we have challenge. I think we use our own challenge example. I mean, we all have friendship issue or family issue. A lot of CM will have family issue, or let's say financial issue, which they have. And I think you truthfully and you can express your in 1 minute or minute and a half or your challenge, and that also open up the vulnerability of yourself. Yes. I think the CM is very vulnerable, seeing there few people looking at them, and I think that's one key. If you can show that you are vulnerable too, and that can get the relationship to CoSA, and then can exchange idea. Nothing you could say that they will believe you if they don't feel that you are a friend. You just somebody mouthing off all this work, right? So I think there is some connection that you can make with the check-in. It's very important.
This is, were you gonna say something, Peter?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just want to say, everything we say is an opportunity to model honesty, right? So when you have that looking out the window thing, think of, that's what I've been sort of thinking. Now here's even though it's a little uncomfortable, here's an opportunity to model an honest interaction, then say honestly what's on your mind. And you'll probably get some more of that back, so.
Like, I guess when I've said, I don't outrightly lie about the check-in, but it may not be happening in the last week, you know, but you relate to that, you gotta adapt it for that. We've spent a lot of time on a bit of this, we've kind of sidetracked a bit with the check-ins, but I think it's important, like Maureen says, if only 30% are doing it, it's something we can all go back to our circles and encourage the ones that aren't here to do a better job also. So if you could do that and keep that in mind, okay?
May I add a small
Yes.
thing? I just appreciate the concept that you have suggested. It doesn't have to be the last week. My life has gotten pretty boring in many respects. In retirement, I don't.
Talking about modeling honesty.
Well, there aren't a lot of challenges other than health, and health isn't part of it, I think. And there's challenges that members of family are having, that's nobody else's business. So, I like what you said. I'm going to spend more time diving back into my more turbulent life before I became a Christian. And I think, actually, in that respect, I have more in common with the CM when I was 25 than when I'm 65, 70 years old. So, you know, it's an interesting point. If you are older than your CM, especially by a significant amount, don't try to relate the problems of your octogenarian life. Talk about problems that you experienced when you were more like them. I was talking about how to get retirement benefits to somebody who's 25 is...
How true, how true. Thanks, Richard, that was a very good point.
Even more important though, I think, is not what happened in that week. I think we're supposed to be looking at what we're dealing with on a personal level. And I can tell you at my age, what I struggle with is the same things I struggled with at 20. My character defects, whatever you want to call them. Some of us were raised, as I was raised as a Catholic, with kind of an examination of conscience. You know, you get up in the morning and you think, golly gee, you know, I did this yesterday, or I wasn't very kind to this, you know, whatever. So when I go that week, it's very easy for me to say, to think of an instance, you know, I was really, and I'm not the most patient person, so I can usually come up with a really good example of how impatient I was that week, right? So I can say, so then it's on a level, nothing to do with that particular week. It's got to do with me sharing from the depths of who I am, not about my personal life, but my own struggles. And that's what we want them working with, their own struggles, their own demons, which we all have. And so that all puts us in kind of the same area, like where it's not us and them when we do that, right?
Yeah.
I just want to add, when you open up yourself as a real story, it's a real person sitting in front of the CM, let them know about you, and that will develop a friendship. This is not a fantasy world or telling a story, but you're actually using yourself, your experience, what your challenge is, and make a real connection. A real connection is what you want.
That's a good summary thing. I think that's an excellent idea, because we need to be genuine. We're not going to sit there and say we're going to tell you what to do to reintegrate. We're going to do this. We're co-community members, and we're there to help each other in that fashion. We come with our flaws and our concerns, and we're going to here to help you with what we can still too. Good. We're not going to go. I'm going to do one other slide before we do the small group sessions, and I'll go with that. The social skills coaching in circles. eye contact is considered one of the most important aspects of communication. And we've talked about that just now, in the
Yeah.
sense of they wander, or they're not paying attention, or whatever else. It is estimated that adults make eye contact 30 to 60% of the time in general conversation, increasing to 60 to 70% of the time when trying to form a more intimate relationship. Giving people who are struggling socially the tools to make more eye contact is usually the first step in social skills training exercises. I'm going to hand out, some of you got it and some of you didn't, but I've got a handout on how to help your core member maintain eye contact, the exercises you can do in a group, and also, so maybe I'll pass that out right now. And if you don't have it, please take it, and if not, go on. The other thing is there's like a pro-socialness scale for adults. It's basically to say these are kind of questions that maybe you want to integrate so that it kind of tells you just what you're dealing with as far as their pro-social skills. And then there's another sheet which I'm going to give you after the small group sessions on ways for volunteers to model pro-social attitudes and behaviors. And then there's the strategies for maintaining eye contact. So I'll give you that after we do the small group sessions. So maybe what we can do is we're going to break into small groups, and the question is basically, what challenges does your CM having regarding pro-social behavior? Give examples of how circles can model or promote pro-social behavior, and what are some creative, engaging suggestions that you could use? So then we'll divide into groups of 4.
The challenges, and a few things came up. I'm going to be very quick. First, one thing was difficulty when, for the core member, when a woman is speaking, a woman volunteer or a male volunteer, there's a different behavior from the core member towards a female volunteer when they wouldn't let her finish talking as opposed to the guy. And that's a tough one in terms of social behavior. Thinking that their behavior was good, that whatever they did when they offended is nothing, like finding a lot of justification. That was another difficult one. One person shared the struggles with being very focused on the custody of his son, because he's gonna end his parole next month, and so just being like all taken by this issue and kind of like staying there with his mind all the time. And then in general, last thing is like not really having a social circle outside the CoSA circle for a lot of core members, and that makes it difficult because they don't know the basics of social interaction. One thing that came up was just as easy as being grateful, being thankful with somebody that does something for you. It's something we noticed. I think there may have been something else, but I didn't write it down. But that's, yeah, mostly what came.
I think one thing we always have to consider too is that you consider some of these individuals have been in jail with only males for 10, 20 years, 6 years. They can't relate necessarily that well to women. So that is always something to keep in mind, that you take that aspect. So that's why it's always been very adamant that we've tried to attain the 2 women and 2 men, so that the core member gets a perspective from women and from men also. So it's kind of another learning experience for them, which is very important to do. And it can be overcome still too some ways. And then that's another thing, is just talking about the attitudes towards women. A lot of the guys that have offended against women, whatever else, have got specific attitudes. So it's something we have to work at constantly with them. Okay? Next person, please. Group 2. Okay, do you want to speak from there, or here?
Yeah, I'll just speak from here. So group 2, 2 of us found that when our CM lies, it's just so obvious, and the CM is relentless. He won't, swerve. He won't change. We found that difficult. Another one, when our CM was totally anti-authority. The police are bad. The teachers are bad. The lights are bad, etc. Very annoying. And another one was the CM was having trouble because he was so limited in the places he could go. Let's say, we understand if it's a school, a community center, etc. But when it's a grocery store that the CM needs to go to, and he's getting some flack for that, finding it very, very frustrating. And the other one, kind of engaging very logistically about 8 months patrol. This one, I see my PO, but in a kind of a snotty way and very irritating for the volunteer to keep listening to that. And the CM is just continuing, endlessly about all the bad things. That was it for us.
Thank you.
And if you can add any, maybe just to think about what you can do to help and promote this, and maybe if there's a problem, what's kind of a possible solution for people to deal with. Number 3, please.
Okay. Good. Challenges is, my experience, we have CM that just buy the time. The pro is another year, and then just sit there and just sit there. They're taking the course. Another challenge is my experience with the CM likes to talk. Just telling you all the story is not listening. So basically, it's a one-way conversation. He can talk for an hour, and then you're listening, and that's what he wants, right? So that's another challenge. Engaging the CM to listen, and that's also the other challenge is I find is sometimes work with the volunteer themselves too. They have to be on the same page. If the 3 volunteers not on the same page, sometimes when the conversation is going one way and the other is going the other way, and so you don't get deep foreign conversation into a need to explore area. So that is another, I think, is a challenge. Although it's not the making of the CM, but it's sometimes the nature of the team. Yeah. For example, for promoting, I guess the circle that I've been in, and we have lunch out, which really promote the trust and the relationship, right? Claudia can testify. We actually became very good friends with the CM, and the CM actually want to continue the circle.
Yeah, we wanted
Not the volunteer. The CM want to continue. They don't want to coast. We threaten it. We're going to coast down, and it's like. So social interaction is very important, actually, to promote the behavior, because people will behave better in front of friends, not strangers. Strangers, they don't care. They only look out the window because you are not their friends. They look out the window, right? If you are the friend, they will, look at you and see what you want to say. Yeah. And I think be open. What creative suggestion is: be open and honest, and try to make a friendship of it in the first few meetings. Because this is going to be a long run, and it's not going to be the first meeting you're going to talk about behavior issue and things like that. But I think it's slowly, it's a progression. So our group suggestion is to build up the relationship, and then we go into the essence of what CoSA stands for.
And just remember with the pro-social aspect again, because that's what we're kind of focusing on, the pro-social aspect is that if you care about them, they should care about you also. And that has to kind of be set up in that sense that, you go in and you buy them coffees. And I mean, Maureen, I remember bringing this point up when she said, when does the CM ever buy his volunteers coffee? And it's things like, at Christmas time, I always bring Christmas cards to the core member. and I said, here are some cards, and you should think about who you can give them to, people that have helped you over the past year, and make a point of doing that. And if you just give them a card, it's great, but if you can give them a chocolate bar or something just to show the gratitude. So this is what we need to do, is the pro-social aspects. They haven't maybe been on the receiving end of that. You have to model it, and you have to show them, and you have to discuss with them how they can do that. Maureen, yes?
You know, and that's an important thing, and it's very, very hard in the circle. Like Anita said, you can suggest they give Christmas cards to family. But what are you doing in your circle for you? It is very easy when you go out for coffee or lunch to pick up the bill, right? And the volunteers usually do. But there is come a point where we need to say, you know what, it would be nice if once you bought us coffee or Tim Hortons or bought it, because we're not teaching them if we're always picking up. One of our fellows, I remember a couple of years ago, it just stunned me, because he got a settlement from residential schools, and he got a good settlement, this core member. And I said to him, you know, maybe this would be, maybe it's easier for me to say than the volunteers, this would be a really nice time for you to take your volunteers out. And he looked at me and he said, Maureen, that is never going to happen.
Sorry,
And I said to, sorry.
Say again.
Pardon?
He said that is never going to happen.
That is never going to happen. And I said to him, you know, I talked to him a little bit, and I said, that is something I've just learned from you about the volunteers and needing to be teaching you about that. You have been taking it, he'd been almost 2 years, they'd always bought for him, but they weren't teaching as they paid. You don't have the funds now, but hopefully when you do, you will be. Do you know what I mean? That pro-social part. So there's so much more to that, because like you've been saying, they've been in prison a long time. And not even prison, they have come from homes, broken homes, you know, most of them, the majority, have not learned any pro-social skills. It's the same as, I forget which one of you, David mentioned about them going on and on and on, you know, talking and not coming up for air. You know, that is not good. That is not pro-social. That is not what a circle is about. And that's why, as many of you who've been here a while know, we have those little stones you can get at the dollar store saying hope or love or something. And it's in the in the middle of the table. And I think the groups need to really stick with this. Even on video you can do it. When someone picks up that stone, you got 30 seconds to finish what you're saying. Or they're running this monologue. You're not getting anywhere. You know, you're not doing anything for them, because you're really encouraging poor pro-social behavior, right? So yeah, recognizing they're not going to be able to do it as we've done it, who've come from good backgrounds and homes, but every single thing we do has got to be teaching them. The friendship, talked about friendship. Friendship is very important, and trust, but that's not the most important. The most important is the relationship, understanding. Friendship is different in CoSA than it is anywhere else. You might be asking them what they did, what they're doing with their sexuality, and very specific questions. I do that. But I am not their friend. They're not saying, Maureen, what are you doing with your sexuality, you know? No, they're not. So they need to understand in the very, very beginning. So watch the friendship too. It is important. Some people don't even need the trust. They know that when they sign up on the dotted line for CoSA, they are saying, I'm coming, I'm disclosing fully. These people are trained. They're not going to talk about it outside. I need it because I don't want to go back where I've come from. So I think we have to put all of those things are important, but if we're not putting the pro-social in with the friendship, in with the buying them things, they're all wonderful, but always that teaching moment. They're not our children, but in that way, they're like our children. What are you teaching your 8-year-old or your 10-year-old when you take them out and buy them something? Are you also saying, hey, when you have some money from your allowance, maybe you're gonna think to do this? So, sorry, I didn't.
Good, no, we need to cover it, although it's not the structure, I think this is good discussion, because you guys know coming, and that's why we give you the small group sessions, is to say, you've got the answers to things too, so share them with each other, and that's what these opportunities are. I think the one thing, David, I just want to comment on is too, is that you're saying he's just there and he's not paying attention. You know, you've got to get him focused. We're not, you know, take a convict out for coffee group, you know? We are a CoSA group, and we have to remember the objective, and that, you know, and just if the circle isn't functioning, if the mandate that CoSA has, if it doesn't fit, if he just wants friendship and he wants to keep on the meetings because he's got these great relationships, we're not following CoSA guidelines. We're not doing our job. And I've been involved in closing some circles because of that, because we're not the friendship source with it. We need to be simply a bridge until they can develop their own contacts and their own acquaintances and friendships. We are a bridge only. Remember that. We're temporary. We need to let the little geese fly away from the nest. That we're just there to help them, to guide them. We're not the answer for it. Yes.
I just want to reiterate, like, those are example of the challenge, and I think the circle that I have, we actually, overcome those, and so those are just, as a group, we want to bring out the challenge.
Good.
So,
No, thank
yeah.
you. Thank you for bringing that up, because that is a concern with some of them. Talking about Maureen with the stones that put in the thing, we've got some stones that we're going to pass around. My daughter put CoSA on them all, and so you can pick one for your group. For the just circulate it around. Each take one if you want to keep it in your pocket when you go to meetings. That if you feel you have to contain your core member, even pro-social, think of it in the sense of saying you're taking all this time speaking, you got to say it's time also for us to give some input into it, and that's the pro-social aspect. It's not all about him for 50 minutes to talk to us. That's not the objective. So we always need to keep that in mind. So if you can pass that around, last group.
No,
were
just
you
a
going to
very,
say quickly,
very quick
Richard?
I
introduction
thought
about the
these were
stones.
chocolates.
We have,
Darn! Oh, I
Don't
like
bite on it.
those. Aren't those neat?
bad for your teeth. In circles in the past, we have tried this concept, you'll all have heard of it, the talking stick. Doesn't work with that kind of person. This is the interruption stone.
That's so cute.
Yeah, whatever you want.
Instead of saying, and they don't pause,
Yeah.
you're giving them a clue, you're gonna cut them off. I like it.
It's good. Okay.
Good.
We're just going to quickly, there's one group left, is there?
Yeah.
Okay, could you just quickly give us a recap, please?
Okay, it's group 4, that's me with them. And we found that one of the pro-social challenges was that CM could be reluctant to talk, shy, inhibited. So in that case, we found a way to promote that would be to encourage volunteerism, joining social groups of like-minded individuals, and emphasize their positive social interactions, or encourage them when they do something that is successful. And there was the last one here, the one CM was having trouble considering entering friendships or relationships, in this case romantic relationships, and that's because so there was a promotion of awareness of appropriate relationships and the progress of them, and what to consider when entering a relationship like that. That's it.
Okay. Just quickly here, pro-social behaviors, nudge your CMs towards pro-social choices, offering to take the CM out for coffee after he's volunteered as his halfway house's Easter meal, as an example. Give him motivation and recognition, reward for when he does pro-social activities. Improve your CM's empathy skills. One of the best ways to improve empathy skills is to read fiction and biographies. Puts you right there in the character's mind and their feelings. Neuroscience studies show that there's more activity in parts of the brain that are involved in simulating what other people are thinking. Studies have found that reading fictional narratives increase self-reported empathy and empathetic skills over time. So that's something that you can get your core members to do. Also, pro-social video game playing, if they can choose games that benefit other human players and cooperative video gameplay, the goal is to benefit other humans players. That's much better than the shooting games, you know, and the destroying games. So if you have that aspect, whether you're playing a lot of video games, encourage them to do the pro-social games as much as they can, okay?
An example?
Pardon?
Any example for that kind of pro-social video game?
I don't know. I don't play that, but does anybody know any of those?
The Water of Mind is one of them.
Okay, good, thank you.
What is it?
The Water of Mind, you try to keep some people alive in a beautiful war.
Okay.
So, yeah.
It'd be good to circulate some.
Yeah. We have a handout here on pro-social attitudes and behaviors, and that's it. Oh, what's this? Hold on a minute. Okay, pro-social life story. How individuals behave is strongly influenced by their scripts or their self-narrative that they've developed throughout their social experience that tells them who they are and why they are that way. Help your CMs examine their antisocial scripts and help them change them to pro-social ones. Okay? And that's that. Okay? And here I'll pass out some papers right now for those that didn't have them.
Form into just a happy little chat, you know? You just kind of chewing the fat. And you're talking about your day, and how was your day, and what's the weather like, and wasn't the traffic bad, or what Christmas shopping malls were so busy, and you forget to remember your mandate is to encourage that CM to progress in their fitting into society as best that they can. And so it's important to start setting objectives for that CM, things that didn't appear to be urgent at the beginning. So things like their health, you know, getting out for that walk. And in the beginning that might not have been an urgent issue, but now you're thinking, okay, this would really help that person. So get out there. How far, did you remember your walk? Did you go more often? How far did you go? Other things that we've found important is to be sure that the CM is being fiscally responsible. You know, like are you remembering to save? Are you handling your expenses properly? How much did you spend last week? Those kinds of things that you just need to stay on track, stay focused, help that individual progress as effectively as possible. So don't let it degenerate into just a social chin wag. That's all. That's all. Thanks, Emily. All right, we're just going to condense the break with a lunch, just so that we can catch up on some time, and we're going to move certain topics around later on.
More here, Tina?
They're still eating.
They're both eating.
You're not supposed to eat.
CM has a job where he works 60 to 80 hours a week. What and how do we address the need of work-life balance and not dealing with interaction with others? So I guess he's isolating himself and he's not doing it. So how do we deal with that? What would be some suggestions?
Doesn't he have any workmates?
Does he have what?
Doesn't he have any workmates, people that he can, you know, be with at work?
Okay.
You know, and maybe encourage that? Because if he's at work, then the usual people he would be in contact with would be people at work, right? And he can actually still practice being pro-social. And in fact, that's good, because he will be living in community, and that's the time for him to really get into it.
So the 60 to 80 hours of work a week, is there any other comments that you'd want to make on that?
The problem with that, even the work, his whole life is centered on one. If something goes wrong with that job, he does not have a social life, right? I think the important thing, number one, is to start off with the idea. We do want to talk about all these other things with him, but the main focus is no more victims and their risk factors and looking at that. So it isn't a priority that they, or a necessity that they listen to us regarding a balance, a good balance. But our role would be always pointing out to them the risk if they're not looking after the whole person, right? If they're just looking after their work. But much as we'd like, it still can't be the focus. The focus still is what they're doing with their sexuality. Most of our core members would not be there. Some of them developmentally challenged, yes, but most of the core members would not be there, are not there for any reason other than they're sexually deviant. And that needs to be the focus. We'd like all those other things, and hopefully we can have an influence, but to me, it's always coming back to the no more victims, the reason they might go back to prison. And it's not going to be, it's going to be, the guys that we've seen in the 21 years go back, it's never something new. It's always the identical problem that they had that they first went to. There's nothing new in this. So look at what they did, look at the situation, and that's where you need to focus. So if they were a workaholic at the time of their offenses, then hey, this is a risk factor. You've agreed to work on your risk factors. But it's sort of a big picture thing. I don't know if that helps you.
It's just some insight and to talk about it. Okay. When the CM keeps committing to do things, but he doesn't do them week after week, as far as like phoning the volunteers.
Tell me about it.
So how should those situations be managed? Any suggestions from volunteers?
Sick Maureen on them.
Yeah, sick Maureen on them. That's a good idea. Now Tina too, so that's good.
And Tina.
That's it.
But she's much tougher than Tina. Tina still hasn't got her teeth fully out there.
What were you going to say, Claudia?
Beat them? We beat them, right?
Beat them, yeah, that's right. That's good.
No, we
Is it their goals? That's the thing. Okay, whose goal is this again? Is it their goal or is it the circle's goal? Because there has to be, and that's where you've got that covenant, the agreement of what they're going to do, right? So whose idea was it, and did they agree to that? And if so, do we need to change those goals? Because it's got to be what they can work on. Always remembering the goals need to be around the risk factors.
Can I say something about the goal? Do we have a goal, not just, no more victims is the basics, but in terms of like how long a circle should be? I remember, Tina, when we did the training together in January, at some point you said our goal is that 1 year and then possibly try to get them off. Because like Richard was saying, like the best thing is a successful closure of a circle. So do we have something like that in the horizon? Because I've been on very long circles now, and it feels like, okay, now what? So one way we deal with it is to kind of threaten them. Okay, so if you don't have any issues, maybe you don't need a circle anymore. And then sometimes it shakes them, right? But is there a goal in terms of the final thing? Is it to close the circle at some point? Is it to...
I think as long as they have risk factors and they're talking about it, some will be struggling with it. It's like AAs, NA. They're going continually because they need it. Some don't, but many do. So it's the same thing, and that's why when it's so important, at least every second or third meeting, to be talking about the risk factors. What did you do? I'll be very blunt. Were you masturbating? What did you do this week? And what were you thinking of it? And what they say, well, I don't have much sex desire anymore. I'm getting old. All the usual little. Then you say, that's is super, you know? CoSA is really about accountability and risk factors. You don't have any risk factors, maybe it's time to graduate. If they go more than a few months, 5, 6 months without risk factors, we move on. This isn't, and sometimes I worry it's us, me included, we don't want to kind of let them go. But I think we need to be very firm, or it becomes that coffee club. And that coffee club is fine if they have risk factors and they feel they need it. We have a couple of guys like that who've been a long time, but they realize, and even though they're only meeting maybe twice a month or monthly, now, when they do, they're able to talk. And at this time of year, there's one that, we closed the circle quite a while ago, but he still calls me right now. We had that warm weather, and there were the little girls in shorts and things, and he's just saying, you know, I haven't had trouble for a while, Maureen, but can I just talk to you about it? I saw these. So actually his circle maybe shouldn't have been closed. Do you know what I mean? Because there's still times that he struggles. So always looking at that risk and being firm to it. If they are not talking about their risk factors and working on them, don't need your help, then set them free, and they need to graduate and be proud of themselves. Always knowing, should things change, they can apply again. Not necessarily the same circle, but we have had cases like that. So I think it all goes back to everything we're talking about today is the risk factors. If you got risk factors, you belong with the CoSA circle. If you're not working on them, you don't. Because that's our goal. Our goal is to make sure nobody else is hurt. No other women, no other children are hurt.
I think, thank you. Oh, sorry. I think that also with it is that you've got just a reminder again, because we're all in need. You know, there's CMs on a wait list, so we need to be able to channel it to the right things, that we need to be able to use our resources effectively. And if they're not doing that, then we need to correct that and see it. And it doesn't have to be confrontational to close it. It just simply has to say, you're not having this, you point out the things with it, and they come to understand. They understand that they're not doing it. And just like some of them keep on going back to jail because they're not ready, they haven't got to that point, some of them are also not ready for the CoSA circle yet too. So we've got to realize that, and sometimes, okay, he still isn't there yet, we're not gonna be it, but then when he comes out again, and which Maureen in the past has been very good about saying, he's out now, should we give him another circle? I mean, situations change and the attitudes change. Maybe that last incarceration did it for him. He goes, like, I don't want to come here anymore, really now, I really don't. And then he's ready, truly ready for a CoSA circle. Okay, Richard, did you have something to say?
I was just going to ask Maureen, can you address in the idea of closing circles and not having risk factors, that there are some core members, you know they have risk factors, you see it, they haven't changed their attitudes, but they insist they have no risk factors, and all they're interested in is the social experience, because the volunteers are so good to them, and they tell them things that really help, but won't admit that they are a risk to the public. How can you work with that, and is that the same as no risk factors if they won't accept that they have risk factors?
No, we can't work with that. If they don't accept they have risk factors, and we think they do. I have said many, many guys, like, you don't feel you do, it's time to close the circle. When we feel that there isn't any risk, we call it a real successful, and we celebrate the graduation. We will have a celebration to say goodbye, but yes, we still have concerns about, like, it's back to the honesty. We are honest, you know, and that was why a couple of things I said today, I felt like we're maybe a little blunt to what people had said or shared, but we already talked about honesty. If we can't be totally honest with each other or with them. So no, I tell them very clearly that we still see perhaps, you know, that there's some things they need to work on, but if they feel that way, it's their circle, they're in charge. It's closed. But we'd still go out and celebrate. We always want to leave them feeling as good as we can about themselves, because otherwise we're creating a risk.
And always, like I say, always foremost, what is the mandate of CoSA? What is it? We're supposed to manage their risk factors. If they don't have it, what are we doing? You know, we're continuing a friendship, quote unquote, with an individual that likes it and wants to do it, but we can't continue like that. And there's been many circles I've closed, that we've been involved in closing because of that. If you're not at risk, you know, it doesn't make sense. This is not part of it. How are you going to talk to him about those issues if he doesn't acknowledge them? So there has to be acknowledgement, okay? Is there any other quick question that maybe we can deal with if you'd like? And because I think that should probably be enough for now. We should move on to the next presentation. Does anybody have anything else that's triggered them to ask about?
I want to ask one thing that we haven't to talk about. Is it a rule for the core member to say that you don't touch me and I don't touch me?
What?
And
Pardon?
what do you mean as far as
Well, that is,
physical
you know,
touch? Physical touch.
is it something that we should not do even by shaking hands?
You're not allowed to hug them.
Yeah, I'm not allowed to.
Hug them.
Oh, no.
No, I mean a touch like often they'll touch.
Peter,
myself.
hug them.
We have to be very careful with any body hugs, and not just women with men, but men with men. A lot of the fellows are gay, so I know myself. Sometimes when they've gone to hug me, even volunteers, they've experienced that. I immediately, if I see you're going to hug me, not here because there's no core members, but when there's core members like at the dinner, if you noticed, I was kind of rude with some people because I'm not going to be hugging you. I might like you, enjoy you, and not hug that core member. So what I did, and I've always done, if you go to give me a hug, I immediately put my hand out like to shake, and there's a break. I did a lot of one-on-one counseling. That's what I was originally hired for in the federal prisons. And I can't tell you how many guys shared with me, and I knew the very volunteers they were talking about going in, and they'd say, you know what, Maureen, I really struggled when she gave me a hug, and you know, her breasts just big chested, and you know, I went back to my cell, and I won't tell you the rest of what they share with me. And that's why I always said when I coordinated the prison ministry program, and I see now they do all sorts of things, but actually it is really, really wrong. We can't show them we care about them without that kind of physical. But yeah, if a guy wants to shake hands or, you know, he pats me on the shoulder, a non-sexual thing. And that's usually kind of a way that you show them you care too, I think.
I think sometimes when, you know, I found in my circles too, it's been a terrible meeting and stuff, and just by putting your hand on their shoulder and showing it, because you don't want to grab them or anything else, it's important to show caring without touching, you know, in that point, because they have to learn that in a lot of ways still too. So it is very important that we don't do that. And if any of your other circle volunteers do that, please correct them on it. Again, it's your responsibility as somebody that's been informed that you do it in a kind and respectful way, but correct behavior of your fellow volunteers in your circles. I know that can be hard, but it is required so that everybody follows the same rules, or then you're not ending up going into something that you know, that isn't even similar to the model we're supposed to use anymore. So, and I know I'm French Canadian, so I hug everybody, you know, that's a real problem. But, you know, I've learned that I can't. I remember coming from Manitoba when I first was here, and every time I talked to somebody, I touched them, and they would look where I touched them, and I'm going like, oh, I gotta quit doing this, you know? Because people are surprised at this, and you can't do it. But I do, like other volunteers or something. If I'm not in the room and I see them, everything else, but when your CM is in there, you can't do that. It can't be, I do to you, but I don't do to you, you know? That's not the way to show caring.
And when you talk about the correction of fellow volunteers, that's really difficult. Volunteers always say, Maureen, why would I do it in the circle? Why can't I talk to them outside? Why can't I do this? And you know what? That core member knows exactly what's going on. And he knows. If we can't be corrected or be open to criticism, and believe me, I've had my share over the years, because it's always a learning, then why are we correcting that? They know, and they know then if we go off on the side and talk about how we should do things better. That's the growth for us. We're not just here to help the core member, we're here to help ourselves too, I think, Rob.
Yeah.
So I think this, doing it without the core member there, I think we're acting like they're not as bright as we think they are. We're not treating them with the pro-social respect that we should. They saw what happened, they heard what happened, it's the same. We don't have a lot of it, but a few times over the years where a couple of volunteers have really clashed, and they've said after, can we meet outside, can we discuss this outside? I said, well, the core member witnessed that. Don't worry, they know there's tension between you two. Let's show them how to help, what a healthy way is to work it out between the two. It's hard, but you know, we're not just there for them if we're really working on ourselves, which we all hopefully are. I don't do a very good job of myself, I know, but I try, right?
And always remembering, you know, how you say it always matters. So be respectful and be careful with that. Okay, I think Angela will go on to the next presentation. Waiting again a bit for a while, I apologize. Dealing with the difficult. Oh, thank you.
Let's give Anita a hand.
Such an
It's hard to do that, Anita. We're really grateful.
I'm not too impressed with the way you always do it. But
Right.
what was that? What did you say?
Modeling pro-social.
Yeah, right. Okay, good. Here we go. Okay, this is something that I saw when this gets started. That's all right. It was a poem that I saw that was written by an offender with it. An individual who was convicted of a crime. It says, unforgiving but forgotten. You released me from hell and told me not to come back. Yet you didn't teach me how to acquire the tools not to return. And now I am released. Thrown into a whole new world with only the tools that brought me into hell. How do I navigate it? Who do I ask for help when the stench of hell is on me and no one wants to be around me? As I burn in my internal suffering, I yearn for a hand. And yet, the hand I receive is a round of applause as I am sent back to hell.
Oh my.
And I think that's a real significant comment that they have to deal with all the time. They know the community doesn't want them. They know they're not welcome citizens. They're not returning citizens. People don't want them to return to the community. So just keep that in mind when you find that sometimes they have a bit of an edge on them, or there's difficulties. Just keep in mind that this is how they feel. It's like having a birthmark probably in the middle of your face, you know, and you can't hide it, and it's always there. So just keep that in mind. Okay, how and why to like your difficult CM. I'm going to go through this rather quickly because I'm behind schedule, not we're behind schedule, I'm behind schedule. So I'm going to cover this, and please come in if there's anything you want to know with it. Why are some core members difficult to like? It's important to note that core members often fall into two categories, the ones that give us a difficult time. The high-functioning core members and the low-functioning core members. Higher levels of offending at both extremes of the IQ bell curve. CMs at both ends of the spectrum can be high risk. So we have these two. The majority are low-functioning or intelligent. The other ones we can get along with, and you know, everything goes well. They're not that difficult, and it's fine. But these two can challenge us and cause us some real concern as time goes on. High-functioning CM. High IQ CMs, especially those with IQ scores of 150 or higher, may have weak social bonds. One study suggests that those with genius-level IQs may feel isolated since they are unable to develop meaningful relationships with individuals with lower IQs. So you put them with the general population, the person population, they can't maybe relate to that many people in there. So it can be difficult for them. They like They like to often be alone and enjoy time by themselves, so that's a socialization challenge that we might have. High IQ individuals tend to have a lower emotional intelligence. That's a trait that helps us to form relationships and hone our social skills. Therefore, they may struggle to make new friends. So knowing that, we know that we have to work on that more so with individuals that have a high IQ. We're finding they're not engaging or they're not relating. Just know that that's a fact, and that's something we have to also keep in mind, the strategies that we have to use to meet our objectives. And this, we have to tailor sometimes our way that we manage the circles based on this. High IQ individuals tend to they're excellent at pointing out flaws or negative points, and we often don't like that too much as volunteers, so we have to make sure to be able to cope with it. They get bored easily. Small talk that has nothing to do with them. They're just like, okay, come on, let's go on. Like, what the heck are you? I don't need to talk about all this stuff like this. They're not challenged by that. Scientists have managed to find out that the higher their IQ, the less they are concerned about many everyday things that seem to occupy most of the people, such as tidiness, watching their language, and going to bed on time. So you can see that's going to be a challenge working and being with other individuals in their halfway houses or whatever else, or their grooming or whatever else. So just know that that is a challenge we might have with high functioning CMs. It might be something difficult for us to understand and to cope with. Paralysis from analysis, and I've had a couple of these, and I tell you, it's a challenge working with them. You have no idea. It's unbelievable. Highly intelligent people struggle with this. It happens when your need to always know the right answer or to make the best decision becomes crippling. They're sitting there and they're analyzing this, and they end up not doing anything, or they get very anxious about what they can't resolve. Higher IQ can be associated with more mental illness, including depression, anxiety, and bipolar. Some studies have found that higher IQ is associated with more and earlier drug use. So this is kind of a factual thing in a way. We're giving some of that information with it. High functioning CMs can make it harder for the circle to get to the truth. They're very argumentative, can be, have their own, and I'm not saying it's for all of them, I'm just saying these are some of the characteristics that we might be dealing with. Have their own plans for the circle. They're going to manipulate us to get what they want out of the circle, not what the circle's objectives are. They try to have CoSA fit their own personal needs or agenda. This is what I want you to do. I want you to go find me a place. I need this from you. I need that for you. That's not necessarily the way it goes. They can be manipulative. They can be controlling. As we know, they want to control the dialogue. They'll talk louder than you when you're doing something, or interrupt you when you're talking to them and speak over you. They want to control the conversation. Challenging, sneaky, and devious. So those are some of the characteristics, and that's what makes some of these core members difficult. And that's we have to recognize that it's a part and parcel kind of coming in when they have high intelligence on them. Low functioning core members. Higher incidence of family mental disorders. That's been documented as far as it goes. Psychosocial deprivation. Higher rates of comorbid psychiatric, meaning multiple kind of conditions with the same person. Like they have anxiety, depression, ADHD, like they have the whole list of them together. Neurodevelopment disorders such as psychotic disorders, ADHD, depression, autistic. So they don't necessarily just have one of them, they have a combination of them. So that's the thing. They have a lack of insight and awareness. They have lower levels of conceptual abstract reasoning. I think I have a slide on that, wait a minute. Yeah, it says, why do you have only 40% of the umbrella? Chance of rain is only 40%. I mean, that's how technical it can end up being. If they don't understand the big picture, and they're very, they don't deal well with abstract things, it's concrete things.
Anita?
Yes?
Could you explain the second point there?
Psychosocial deprivation, being in an environment where it's been very integrated, they're very limited, the family situation, so that maybe the family's got mental health illness, they're isolated, they're kept at home. I had one guy that his father his father was at home because he was handicapped, and the mother was out working, worked with it. And then what he did is that his father, for his entertainment, would have his friends and their children come over, and they would have sex together. And their enjoyment was watching their children have sex together. And this one guy, at the age of 8, was already having sexual relations with his 5-year-old sister. And he ended up having, I think at 13 years of age, the daughter ended up having his baby. So he's the uncle and the father also to this individual. That's he said he did not realize until he went to prison that the other people didn't do this. He thought that was his normal. That was normal for him. That was his family environment. So it's a real deprivation of what happens in the world. And that's why I think CoSA circles are so good. We show them, there's another side of things. You may have been raised in this kind of environment, but this is not always, this isn't normal per se. Does that answer your question a bit? Poor ability to form normal sexual and personal relationships. No, I've got a bit more on that after. Poor impulse control. Self-awareness and problems with planning. Like if you're going to say, okay, let's do this day and this is how you can do it, they need help with that. They're not great at planning. So we need to give them more help. You can't treat one CM the same way as the next CM. You have to tailor your approach depending on what their needs are. Okay? Okay, I'll show you that. Low-functioning CMs may have difficulty in understanding and processing information, leading to feelings of frustration and isolation. So if you're saying, he just looks like he's always something's going in, but he's not talking to us about it, he's just frustrated. It's because oftentimes he's not understanding and processing that information correctly, or he's feeling very frustrated by it. So we have to have some understanding about that. Needs help from volunteers, the PO, this is what we need to give him. He has maybe difficulty in generalizing experiences. He can't just, like I'm saying, like that umbrella thing. It's like, you just gotta say, because this happened like this, I can make an assumption that this might happen. They have very hard times doing that. They can't derive this. Difficulty in grasping concepts, including empathy. They are more concerned about the consequences to themselves. So we can work with it, on empathy with them, showing them, how do you think somebody else would feel like this? If you were in this position, what would you do? Feelings of frustration impacted on motivation. So often misidentified as unmotivated or difficult. So you're saying, this guy is uncooperative. He's not doing anything we have to do. We label him in that sense that it's not correct, because maybe what it is, he's having feelings of frustration and impacting on and it impacts on the motivation. So if he feels he comes to the circle all the time and he says stuff, but someone's always at him all the time and questioning him and doing this and showing face, he's doing this again and he still hasn't done this again. Like, you're wondering, he's going to be maybe labeled as difficult, but he isn't being difficult. It's just that he's frustrated, and we have to understand that, where it's coming from. Low-functioning core members, again, sexual offenses committed by persons with a lower IQ have been linked with sexual naivety. They don't have experience with it. The lack of sexual knowledge and experience. Often less opportunities for consensual relationships. They don't have, at 17 or 18 or 20 or 25, they may not find a partner that wants to have consensual relationships with them. Low social and interpersonal skills. Again, these factors, paired with an understandable desire for interpersonal proximity, they want to be close to somebody, they want a loved one, they want a boyfriend, they want a girlfriend. And sexuality by people with low IQs, just like most people, may indeed contribute to inappropriate sexual behaviors or relatively minor sexual offenses. So improper talking or touching, kissing a stranger, indecent exposure, peeping. I can think of one CM we had that's had circles about 7 times, and this is a picture of him completely. Inappropriate touches, he works in a restaurant, inappropriately touches people. He just can't seem to grasp the concept that you can't invade on people's private spaces either. Oh, sorry, okay. Sexual offenses committed by persons with intellectual disabilities, that's what ID stands for, I don't know if I brought that up before, generally result from impulsivity and poorly controlled behavior rather than an underlying sexual deviance. They are just, well, this other part will explain it a bit. Those who have committed a sexual offense were significantly less likely to be involved in an offense that required planning, because we know they're not good at planning. That is, their offense were more likely to be of an impulsive and a reactive type. So what kind of things do you have to show them in that group? Is that saying, what if this happens? What do you do next? So that they don't respond to the impulse and that thing. You've got to give them scenarios, and you got to say, okay, if this happens, you're in the bus and this child sits beside you, what are you going to do? And then you give them scenarios to say, so that they know they can at least pre-think about what they can do and to manage the situation. Abusing alcohol and other, I found this an interesting fact, abusing alcohol and other drugs is clearly associated with non-sexual and sexual violence in the general population. There are some indications that individuals with ID that have been convicted of sexual offenses are significantly less likely to use or abuse substances than individuals that have been convicted of a sexual offense that don't have intellectual disabilities. So, and I'm just thinking, Maureen and Tina, in the past, have you found that, you know, with the lower functioning CMs, that they don't usually have a problem with alcohol abuse? Have you found that with your experience as opposed to others? Yeah.
And one of the big things is they often are FAS. And they're the ones that are so hard with the circle. We just are not successful. They go back because the impulsivity, they don't get cause and effect. They just can't get it. They're repulsive and they're really hard. We accept them knowing that no matter what we do, that they're not going to get the cause and effect, that we can keep them reporting. So that's why every single meeting is, what did you do on Monday? And who did you see? And how did you do it on Tuesday? And then we're finding out because they just can't.
So if they have a diagnosis, or you find out when in the disclosure that they have fetal alcohol syndrome, FAS, those are things that you can anticipate and how you can probably manage that circle in that way. You have to be much more attentive and detail-oriented. Individuals with intellectual disabilities are at greater risk of reoffending in the first year. So we know that. So we really, even though we think, oh, he's not a challenge, or not really, you know what? Statistically, they do their offenses the first year. So be aware, they are a high risk. In some studies, the sexual recidivism rate of individuals with intellectual disabilities is 6 times that of non-intellectual disabilities sexual offending. Some individuals with intellectual disabilities have been convicted of sexual offenses, indeed show preferential pedophilic interests. Children victimization from this group may also be due to a lower sexual selectivity, both for age and gender, instead of genuine pedophilia. So that's an opportunistic thing. It's like, you've got an individual that's lower functioning. He doesn't relate well to adults. He can't talk. We had one in one circle that just didn't spend any time with his co-workers. They had to go away on a weekend for something. He couldn't even deal with coping with them. He can't stand there and talk with them. With it, he's more comfortable with children. So he goes into the children, and then his offenses are against children. So it's like an opportunistic thing. It's the only source of sexual gratification or attachment that they can have. So those are things that you have to say. It's not like that they're sexual deviance in the sense. It's opportunistic. They want closeness. They want, that attachment to somebody, and they can't do without it. Yes, Maureen?
Can I just, and I don't know if this is the proper time, and I'm no expert, I've read very little, but my experience with pedophiles, which is the majority of who we work with, fall into 3 types. And I think it's very important to look at. I would say the majority of who we work with, or at least half, are low-functioning coordinators, talking about it there. So we take the one who many of you know. He wasn't at our dinner this year, but he's been coming. He can't miss him because he's 6'6". He's huge. He is developmentally age 8 to 9. We've closed his circle now. He's being difficult again. It opens, it closes, it opens, it closes. But regardless, his last offense going back, was for showing his Teddy and his BC Lions little mascot to a little girl on the SkyTrain, whose mother recognized his picture because he's a big guy bent all over, right? This guy will never ever be able to relate to an adult woman. Never. I mean, what adult woman's going to look at this guy whose IQ is developmentally age 8 or 9? Is he a true pedophile? I don't, not from the definition I understand. He is developmentally so young that what chance does this guy have? He's fallen through the cracks. I mean, going back to his family, he had no family, his mother's kids, the whole thing. So that's a good portion of them are developmentally. Then there are a good section of our pedophiles, or what you call them. I don't believe are pedophiles at all. They were raised in families where they were abused, that this was part of it. And once they go to prison, they go to programs and then come to CoSA. Oh shoot, sorry. Once they go to prison, they realize this doesn't happen in every family. This isn't a secret that goes on. I can't do this. And they work really well with CoSA and they don't go there again. Even though there's memories and experiences, right? Then there's that small percentage that are pedophilic. So I think it's important to point that out at this point that I'm not saying that I know it all, but if I look back at the over, well, probably now it's getting 280, 290 of core members, that is the case for pedophiles. And I don't think there's a lot of them. So I think you need to remember, is it coming from their low functioning, or is it coming from their upbringing or what have you? Or are they true pedophiles? And if they're true pedophiles, there are different ways that we work with them, right? So I wanted to
thank you.
low functioning, you know, is a really, really big part of the pedophiles, so-called pedophiles we work with. I don't call them pedophiles, I just call them low functioning, and how are we going to do it? And then I'm sure after we'll talk about the circles and how we best deal with them. I'm pretty sure that's coming.
Yeah. Okay. Next, studies suggest that it is plausible that past sexual victimization limited opportunities for consent. Did I read that already? No. For consenting sexual relations with adults, circumstantial opportunities with minors, a lack of social sexual knowledge, or lower discrimination towards sexual targets, people that they're going to approach, rather than a genuine paraphilic interest, explain most of the events of the paraphilic sexual offenses by individuals with intellectual disabilities that have committed sexual offenses, which is the summary statement for what Maureen just said, that's the situation. Okay, so we're going to break into small groups. I have some handouts here, and this time we're going to do the numbers the opposite. So 1, can you say the numbers as you do it?
1, 2,
3,
4.
1. Could you please report? Peter.
Low functioning CM. Because the offenses are circumstantial, sometimes means they might not reoffend. So it's a little different perspective. Help them see a broader perspective on society. Build self-confidence in themselves, and have patience with them to achieve connection on their level.
Good.
And then I do the other one too?
Yes, please.
Okay. This is the high functioning one. There was a discussion about pairing high functioning volunteers with high functioning CMs might be important. Honesty is key because of course they're smart and they can figure out when you're being dishonest. Focus on their choice to be in the circle. You're here for a reason. Challenge them and actually challenge the volunteers to keep them on that sort of topic as to why they're there. Bring them back to some sort of basic realities such as compassion. And one of the things that we actually talked about in our last circle was how would you apologize to your victim's mother as a way of getting them to see something like empathy as opposed to just making excuses? And build bonds with them, emotional bonds.
Good, thank you.
That's it.
Do Tina or Maureen have any comments?
It's perfect.
Okay, go. Did
Yeah,
you?
no, I think that's really, really good, and the idea of pairing them with people of higher IQ too, I think is good, because they get, I don't have a high enough IQ, sometimes they corner you. You gotta have confidence and you gotta have that IQ to deal with them. One of the things I noticed too, and it just came to mind with the higher functioning, is how often they will say, but my crimes are not nearly as bad. They tend to really minimize, and that just came to mind when you were talking about that. And that's something that, and sometimes you need people who are, I don't know if they're high functioning themselves, but they can deal with conflict. I would say people who can deal with conflict. Because a lot of the volunteers come in with compassion and caring, but it's just not in them to have to deal with that kind of you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Thank
you
you.
brought a lot of things to mind that group did. I think that was
Good. Number 2, group number 2,
That's
please.
me.
Okay.
I'll just quickly finish with our high functioning CM because we found that one a little more challenging. We thought that perhaps at every opportunity to support the idea of empathy, your same idea, Peter. We asking them to be empathetic. But then we had a lot of ideas for the low functioning CM. We need to rephrase questions and rephrase concepts. You have to do a lot of role modeling with them. You have to reward their good behavior in very concrete ways. You have to be very specific with scaffolding and very specific with step-by-step ways to support that individual getting through to achieve their goals. Give them more time to process and then to respond to your questions. And take an active role in setting agendas, etc. with them.
Thanks. Very good. Do you have anything to add?
You know, that's so good, but with the lower functioning, one of the things that I really struggle with is the minute you have 3 or 4 volunteers, it's too much input coming at them.
Yeah.
It needs to be focused and simple. And yet when you have 2 volunteers and 1 is away, what happens to the circle? But, you know, so I think with the low functioning, that is the real challenge. There's too much coming at them.
Yep.
And you have to actually get them to repeat what they hear you say, and then you repeat what you're hearing them saying. And how often it's so far apart because they don't get it, and we think, hey, they're not being honest, they're not being open. It's just coming at them too much. So often if you can get one really quiet person who is new or who just wants to listen, but can be available if one of the other 2's away, because they can't take 3 people's input. Many of them can't, so.
Thanks, Maureen. And what about, did you have, no, you didn't. That's good. Okay. Number 3?
Okay, we'll go from the low functioning first. Very simple points. We mentioned about visuals. Visuals is really effective. And also we have to tell them about the sensation, our 5 senses. Using something that is very basic, simple. Don't use something that is with a lot of wordings, waiting for time for them to process. Simple concept, basic concept. And there's one point that is very good about telling the CM to be straight and forward. No. Especially when you know that he will do some inappropriate, or he doesn't really know the basic concept of what is inappropriate. When he does that, the volunteer should immediately telling him that no, you cannot do that, be straightforward. And I mentioned that it's a good idea, especially for a male volunteer to do that, because especially for the male, you know about the responses, the physical responses, so it is more direct also that the male can really point out that. But the female has another approach, and compassion for the low functioning one. And for high functioning, we agree that most of them, they are trying to manipulate the meeting. They are argumentative. So that's why we as volunteers, the beginning of the group, when we start, we need to set the goals. We need to really have the accountability that all those goals are being processed. And that's one very good example from one of our volunteers about a CM who claims himself to be an educator, a protector. He knows everything. He does all the research already. You volunteer, you don't know even better than me. I'm fine. I'm trying to teach the children to get naked. They will come across this situation when they grow up into the community. So we want to let them know that, what did we say about
Parents are the
yeah,
educators.
we talk about that. Okay, is it the law? Is it the rule that you can really the realistic situation when you are in the society? What is the rule of the provincial government? Are you allowed the children to get into the society and get naked? So we want to make them know that what are the regulations, what are the rules of the real society, and to be respectful, to let them know that we are here to support you, so that we need to be respectful to each other.
Thank you, good. I think the only one comment I can make is that if, let's say, a low-functioning individual is showing some distorted, realities, or is not doing something that shouldn't, that we have to also be very careful with how we say no, that they're very sensitive to criticism. So we have to be really careful, because that could shut down communication still too. Do you agree with that? I find a lot of low functionings are very sensitive to that. But that's the only thing I could say. Yes, you have to do that. You have to correct, not the pro-social behavior or the concepts, but you have to do it in a way that they can hear it and that it's respectful. Okay, number 4.
Yes, no is important, but they aren't our children, so.
Yeah.
They're gonna like, we're the bridge, they're gonna be on their own, right? So how do we get them to say, yes, I need to do this, or no, I can't do this, in what they're sharing with us, right? Because if they're our child, it's not like our 8-year-old or our 10-year-old child, they're going on their own shortly. So somehow in that, if you just say yes or no, what are they going to do? Do you know what I mean? When we close the circle, when they move on, because we can't be there for a lifetime. So how do we get them to do it, maybe?
Okay, number 4, please.
You're pointing, Lorianne.
You're it.
I'll say a little bit then. For the low-functioning fellow, do role play or scenarios and repeat stuff often. And okay. And for the high-functioning guy, I thought the idea of honesty is important, and try and introduce empathy.
Okay.
However you do that.
Okay. Well, try to place yourself into somebody else's position. What would you do if something like this happened? Again, getting them to experience it themselves. What were you going to say, Maureen?
I was just going to say honesty is so important. The higher the functioning, the harder to get the truth. Because they've got that gift verbally. They know how to couch it and how to put it. And there again, we're back to volunteers who can take that on, right? And the low functioning is so true too. I think the biggest thing with low functioning, when I'm looking at volunteers, I think, who is patient? I can't be one pair circle because I know I'm not patient. And you need a lot of patience to work with them. And
Do you meet them before?
I do. I always interview them before, and yeah, and so we have a pretty good idea then when you're looking. Mind you, that doesn't mean with the lack of volunteers that we have, that there's a lot of choices. I used to have a lot more choices. Just like now, you look at the circle you were on last, Andy. I mean, very, very low functioning, no real hope. But I knew that you two, and both guys, I knew that because of his behavior with women and what have you, I knew you both would have the patience. And I would listen to you think, oh my goodness, I could not do it. I learned so much. But you do have to have that. And that's got nothing to do with the high functioning or low functioning. That's more. So if you are a person who, like Ken, you're another one who has patience till it comes out your yin yang, right? So if you're a patient person, you need to help Tina and I, or to know what kind of core member that you feel you could work best with. We might not be able to do it, but if possible, it helps us for you to tell us what you'd be good with, right? What you'd be most successful or comfortable.
Thank you very much. And thank you all of you for putting your heads together because you got good suggestions. You've had some of these individuals in your circles and you can contribute and we all help each other. Again, this is this pro-social aspect we're talking about. A couple things to cover and then we're going to go into the next session, so we've got to zoom along. Brought up to the steps, this is this core member going up and thinking about it and how can I stop it? Then the next step is setting it up. How can I stop that? And then getting the chance, how can I stop that? And then hurting someone, how can I stop that? Get them to think in increments like that as their thought process continues, as they're setting it up. So make sure to keep that image in mind when you're doing it. There's certain things you can do at each step. And so implement that and discuss that with them. Also, like the motorway to offending, they can choose the warning signs, the thoughts and wants, or they can exit off the ramp. Or they can, next one is to go to saying it's okay, or they can exit. So these are all stages that you can intervene at, or you can get them to think about. Next is setting it up, and then hurting someone again. So this is kind of a visual to kind of explain to everybody that there's a way to get out of it. Just because it's like a snowball going down the hill, you gotta stop it before it does. Basic skill areas are often found lacking in CMs with intellectual
Disabilities.
Disorders. Okay, communication, understanding consequences, expressing emotions. Sex education, the consent, appropriate touch, and healthy expressions of sexuality. We can talk about those things. Seeking help from peers or professionals. Speak to your PO. Is there somebody else that you can, or is there another program you can take to assist you? Moral reasoning, understanding right from wrong. And then identifying and becoming involved in leisure activities. Other skills identified as important for community integration is need for repetition. Oh, okay. Anyways, you read the first line. Okay. Impact of impaired verbal comprehension and reading skills. We got nabbed on that one quite a bit, where we thought he was much more, we thought he was capable. We thought he was at high school level because he said he got that in prison, but he was a reading level of grade 3, so he couldn't take his plumber's license, which was offered to him as far as the education. So we were wrong in not having realistic expectations of our core member. Inherent difficulties with abstraction and generalization. We've touched on that. Tendency towards aqueous bias. What the heck again? Now I got my mind. What point I wanted to bring up with that? I don't know. Anyway, sensitivity to criticism. Let me think. My mind's going crazy. Low functioning CMs need limited and focused input. Need more pauses during meetings. You might want to take a break. Need clarification on what volunteers are saying. They need patience. They need affirmation and encouragement. they need help with daily decisions, and they need help with enhancing self-regulation and self-control. Okay, the risk needs responsivity principle. We're going to talk about this probably the next program, the next advanced training, but risk principle is criminal behavior can be reliably predicted, and that treatment should focus on the highest risk offenders, which are saying by the low functioning and high functioning. Needs principle, assess criminogenic needs and target them. Responsivity, maximize the CM's ability to learn by providing focused and goal-oriented support and accountability, and tailoring it to the learning style, motivation, abilities, and strengths of the core member. Static versus dynamic risk factors. Static risk factors are ones you can't change. It's their age, their weight, their whatever else is their education. I guess education would be one because you can change that. And the dynamic risk factor is basically they're changeable. So it's like, my mind is just, I'm on, I think, overdose here. I don't know what it is, but anyway, let's go. What we hope to achieve as volunteers is to see significant improvements in sexual offense-related attitudes. We can have an impact on that. Reduction in attitudes relating to cognitive distortions and pro-sexual assault beliefs. Improvements in victim empathy. Improved attitudes towards women and children, regardless of where their offenses are related to. Explore and challenge attitudes consistent with offending both generally and in relation to specific offenses, and focus on responsivity, including learning style, cognitive abilities, and life circumstances and experiences. And that's it. Helpful hints is ensure that you don't have an unconscious bias towards your CM. That's very important. We have conscious biases, which are biases we're aware of, and we have unconscious biases, which we're unaware of. But they are stored away in our mind, and they still affect what we think and how we behave. So if you have a transgender core member, maybe you have issues with that. That's a bias, and you're saying, oh, well, no, there's no problem with that, I can deal with that. You've got to be aware of even your unconscious biases. Maybe different nationalities or different traits, or if they're indigenous, or if they're whatever the bias that you have and that you believe this, you've got to recognize that so you can deal with your core member properly. And last and not least, I guess that last one, I think. Rethink feelings of allies so we can escape the negative emotions trap. The trick is to be able to identify the emotion correctly, then figure out what change in our behavior will alleviate it. The goal isn't to banish the feeling, but to harness it for positive transformation. So I'm saying, I'm angry, I had one circle I hated going to for 2 years. Every Monday, I hated, Maureen knows, I just said, I gotta do something different, because you know what, I'm either gonna have to quit this, which is not good for the CM, that's not supportive. I've committed that I'm going to do it. I have to figure out some way to change this attitude of mine. So if you can even figure out, why am I angry? It's, maybe you're thinking, I'm not really helping him, I don't know what I'm going by, and just saying, I'm angry because I care so much that it upsets me that I can't get to this guy. So transform that negative thing that you have when you're talking about CMs or when you're dealing with them, turn it around into a positive. Like, identify why you're feeling that way, and then just figure, I've tried 10 different ways to get this, it didn't happen. Well, then challenge yourself to find an 11th and a 12th way. Just do that. Find out if you're having difficulty and you can't get past it. Phone Tina, phone Maureen. I kept in contact with Maureen for 2 years, probably every 2 weeks, saying, I can't do it, help me, this is driving me crazy. And she would give me some additional tools to help, and we'd go on and we'd discuss things, and I'd reframe them, and that's what we need to do. Does everybody kind of agree with that? Because we have biases and we have feelings, so that's it. Okay, we're done with that one. So now we're going to go to principles. Okay, but can I just highlight a couple of things that we need to get on principles? We won't talk about principles of group support. I'll hand you this once. I just want to talk
quickly, 1
Anita,
minute.
can I say one thing on bias that's hitting me from what you said about bias? And I wouldn't have thought about it till Anita was talking there. But we used to think with new volunteers, I used to think, put them on an easy circle to start with. And then, you know, kind of build it up. And now I've found the opposite. I find that what I was hitting me as a bias. You're on a really smooth, and there's not too many of those, but really pretty easy, that middle of the road. And then you go to another circle, and you're very biased towards that core member because he's not like the other one who was working the program and doing. So I think that we have to be really careful that we're not biased based on a previous core member. Because it can be really, does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's something I've only just realized in the last while, that is not working. Because they go, and I can think of one particular, and a couple of you sit on that circle where the volunteer has a real issue with the core member, and it isn't terribly nice to tell you the truth with the core member, and I think it bothers the other volunteers somewhat. And I think it's because this volunteer was on another circle where he was just a real sweetheart, right? Everybody liked him, he's on a really good path. He probably didn't need a circle, probably not 10% of what the other guy needs the circle, right? So we have to watch that bias if we're going from one circle to another circle, not based on our feelings towards our previous core member. And that's, I think, for new volunteers, very important to remember. Lucas, you know, only for a short while, but you still got that sense of him as a core member. And he was really good to work with versus a lot. He really was. So try to watch that.
Okay, next we're going to talk quickly, I've got about a minute and a half for each of the points, and so we can't really discuss it. If you do, you can talk to us, the three of us, after. We're just going to have to kind of cover it first of all. This is our Bible as far as it goes with CoSA. These are principles of group support. This is very important. Refer back to it if you ever have issues with anything, okay? The first thing I just want to, down in the supports, it's use affirming language and avoid use of labels. I just want to say that labels can be assigned to the people we hope. Abuser, rapist, pedophile, sex offender, child molester, stalker, offender. And these are all labels that are based on what somebody has done. But what we want, why call someone by what you don't want them to be? So we shouldn't be referring to them as sex offenders. So nobody wants to be defined by the worst thing they've ever done. So labels activate a stereotype. When we're talking to our friends about what we do in CoSA, we shouldn't be using those kind of labels also. And this is it as far as the information of it. Considerations regarding respect the dignity and inherent worth of the people we work with. And that means using alternative dialogues. We use that in our things as core members, but not when we're talking to our friends or family or other possible volunteers or talking about it in general. Just keep that in mind. Man with pedophilic sexual interests, person with a history of violent offending, people who have committed crimes of a sexual nature, individual that has been convicted of a sexual offense. Support their rehabilitation. They want to be new people. They're coming to us to help to be better people. We need to use better terminology with them. Higher expectations lead to improved performance. So be careful with the labels that you use when you're talking about them, okay? Next is, another point I just want to bring up is, again, maintain eye contact and show them how to do it. You have a worksheet about that. Avail yourself to training that is provided. Please come back to the next session and encourage your other circle members to come. On the caution side, opposite gender volunteers may meet with the CM in a public location but never meet with the CM privately or alone in a car to a meeting place. 2 volunteers always have to be present when riding in a vehicle with a core member. Some people still remember we all had the guideline before, if you're a male you could transport a male, if you're a female you could transport a female by yourself. But there's a lot of conditions where males are attracted to other males and everything else, and those rules don't apply anymore in the sense. So we have to protect ourselves and the volunteers still always, the core member, we should be 2 people. We can meet them, we can say, you take the bus to the aquarium and we'll meet you there and that's okay. You can do it alone at that point, but you gotta make sure if you're doing anything intensely that you've got 2 volunteers. Dress and present yourself appropriately so you not become a trigger. Summer's coming up, keep the clothes on. If it's really hot outside, I end up.
Do we have to?
Yes, you have to keep your clothes on. Okay? That's it. So the point is that we have, but the point, when we're going to meetings, the point is it could be bloody hot outside. It should be hot outside. And what it is that I know if I've got short sleeves or a tank top or something with it, not that I'm appealing at 70 years old, but I'm just saying, this is just a general rule to follow, is that if you've got that, but sometimes it doesn't matter, you could be 80, it doesn't matter. But anyway, the point is that if I'm wearing something sleeveless or whatever else, I have a sweater in my car and I put it on before I go to the meetings. And remind your other volunteers of the same thing, to dress appropriately for the situation. We're dealing with sexual offenders. We're dealing with individuals that have been committed of a sexual offense, so please dress accordingly, okay? Next, there are no secrets between the members of the group. If you're on a phone call with your core member and he tells you something, you make sure it's not a one-on-one. He doesn't have a mentor. He has a circle, and that means everybody has to know the same information. Do not keep anything, it should never be anything with just you and the core member. Everybody has to know. For faith-based core members wishing to go to church, volunteers should not accompany them, and the rationale for that is there's a policy, and maybe I didn't make copies of it, but I can send it off to everybody, but I'll quickly read it. Connecting to a faith community is a great idea, but one that needs to be navigated. Of course, any conditions you would need to be adhered to. The parole officer would have to buy in. As long as the PO is supportive, a CM can attend a church. And is a general right. Being introduced to a community of faith by a CoSA volunteer is not part of that right. The concern here is that unless there is full disclosure, the accompaniment of a core member may be inferred by the community as an endorsement of that core member. A general endorsements may not be intended, especially as we consider the needs and safety of the children and survivors of sexual abuse. So that's clear. In small communities of faith, that's why encouraging a CM to attend church is a great thing, but accompanying the CM is another. While our intentions may be good, we must also consider potential legal consequences, particularly in the unlikely event that someone is harmed, as well as the possibility that we could inadvertently contribute to the creation of a harmful situation. Okay? And then that's it. And again, it's just, which has been covered, the relationship formed is one of trust, but different from a regular friendship. We have a special friendship with them, and Maureen has covered that, so I won't do any more. Yes, Claudia?
I had a question about this. Even when I initially started using the word friend, that wasn't really something we were supposed to do, but I hear it more and more. I just want to clear, can we be using that word?
Well, we were talking about it is a special friendship.
Yeah.
And I always talk about the limits of it, is that when the circle is over, we won't be able to communicate again. We're just here temporarily to see you from incarceration to when you get reintegrated into the community. I make it very clear to all our circles that this is not kind of this ongoing thing. It's very clear, and we have to be careful with that. If anything, it's the volunteers that err on that more than anything else. They take them in, so we have to be cautious and careful of that.
And remember too, one thing with that is the imbalance of power.
Yeah.
Friendships, there's a balance of power unless it's relative. So there is an imbalance of power. We have a control. They have to do certain things to have our relationship, right? And so it's a very unique kind of friendship. In fact, when I first started this, I protested. This is not friendship. Support and accountability I'm okay with, but they insist nationally it's friendship. But it's a very unique kind of friendship. And I always say, no, we're not your friends. We're here to support you and help you. Do we care about you? Yes. Yeah. But we're not your friends. So don't ask me about my personal life, right?
You can get back at you as well. Like they can say, oh, I thought we were friends. And then you're stuck if you're always using the word friends.
So say goodbye the minute you're not needing to talk about your risk factors. It's goodbye. Is that friendship? No, that's not friendship. This is support, right, for you in this situation.
So you gotta qualify it. That's what it is. 1 minute of fame here. 90 seconds of fame, and then we're going to close up after this.
Okay.
My name is Richard. Preamble. I was a teacher for many years, and I loved to lecture.
Oh, no.
So I was commanded to keep it to 90 seconds or else. Keep it short, Dickie. Don't you want to run on? Yeah, exactly. I can do that. And just to let you know, I don't sugarcoat, but I hope I will give you a positive overall outlook. Got your timers on?
You're out of minute.
Well, I just have to read faster. My CoSA volunteer experience, the successes, the missed opportunities, the failures. 10 years, 10 circles. Has it been worth it? Let's look at the numbers. Core member diagnostics, or demographics. Longest running, 3 years. Shortest, 2 weeks. 9 males, 1 female. The youngest, mid-20s. The oldest, mid-70s. 8 pedophiles, 3 incest cases, and 1 non-pedophile sex offender. 3 murder or attempted murderers. 9 on parole. 1 on special release. And the disheartening one, CMs exposed to sexual abuse as children, that's themselves, all of them. The outcomes, 1 unqualified success, parole, discharged, free. 2 very good successes, resuming a good life in society. 1 unintentional breach, that was sad. 2 intentional breaches of conditions, 3 left voluntarily. 1, just 1, reoffended, and that was not the pedophile. Conclusion. So has it been worth it? Yeah, well worth it.
This is going to be a trial balloon for June because it's too soon. But essentially, we're just going to piggyback on this type of a fundraising thing for now. And eventually, if we find that, you know, it's a good way for us to raise funds without really asking them, it's good.
Sorry, just another 15 seconds. I'm really sorry.
I'm gonna count.
Even if we raise only $5,000, it is still $5,000. But that's a start.
Yeah.
And almost all charities will surpass that because there is always friends and family of the volunteers want to support it.
Yeah.
Even everybody put $5, you will be amazed how much you could gather.
So usually how it works, Maureen, is that if you're running or if you're walking, you ask your friends and your family, you say you're gonna run or you're gonna walk, and they will pitch in and raise money basically, and that goes to
But
us.
every walker pays
$55.
So, yeah, so that's a fair chunk you're
Yeah.
getting there, because they're getting, for 10 people, they're getting,
Yeah.
550, they're getting quite a bit, really.
They're getting a percentage of that, basically, also. Anyways, we can talk about that more sometime in the future. We promised the early birds prizes, so if your names are called, please collect your prizes from Mel. Okay, so that's, sorry, at the end. So that's Claudia, Freya and Paul, Christine, Mel, Jack, Anton, Steve, Richard, oh, Ash is not here. Okay, so all of you win a prize for being the early bird registrants. The ones who didn't win a prize, you get a consolation prize as well, so you can also go to the table and ask Mel for it. So before we end, there's just one reflection that Peter is going to read out, and hopefully we can, you know, go home and think about it.
Not very long, one paragraph. Reflection, shifting of CoSA volunteers' perspective. Take notice of the thing
take notice of the things people, including CMs, do that get on your nerves. That is an indication of a teacher at our doorstep. These people serve as a mirror to us and help us uncover what needs to be revealed about ourselves. Seeing characteristics we dislike in others helps us to take a deeper look inside ourselves for similar traits or challenges that may need some loving attention, adjusting, or changing. Everyone around us is reflecting something to us if we look hard enough to find it. Each person offers us the chance to grow, learn, and excel into better versions of ourselves. We can learn so much from other people if we tap into a new way of thinking and a new way of looking at things. Usually this means we must look into the mirror of someone else, take a genuine and honest look at what they are reflecting back to us. With this shift in perspective, we begin to see people for who they are, and it offers us a better understanding of who we are as well. It also allows us to move into a space of gratitude for each other, including a CM that comes into our path, for they are there to help shape us into who we were meant to be.
Way to go, Peter.
That's way to end, yeah, good thought.
All right, so anyone want to add anything else? I think you'll just have to reflect on that on your own.
And if you register as a walker, you always you will get your shirt. And at the end, after you finish, you get a medal.
Wow.
Way to go.
Okay.
So if we could ask that everybody hands in their evaluation forms, it's useful.